In this video, we are going to compare the HigherDose, Kala, and Healthy Wave infrared PEMF mats. Both the HigherDose and Kala companies have extremely popular infrared PEMF mats, but their main specialties were originally in other products. For HigherDose, it's their sauna blankets, and for Kala, it's their red light therapy. And it's great. They want to offer more products to their customers. But in our opinion, both are either lacking in providing specs about their product or having misleading to a little bit incorrect specs, especially when it relates to the PEMF therapy, which can lead some customers into thinking they're getting some features that actually aren't available in these mats. Compared to our team at HealthyWaveMat.com, who came out with the original infrared PEMF mat back in 2017, and probably have some of the most detailed specs and testing out there when it comes to PEMF therapy. So we are going to compare all three mats, do some tests so you can see the objective facts and how these mats compare in critical areas. And I think the testing will show Healthy Wave surpasses both these mats hands down in virtually every area. While both HigherDose and Kala each only have 1 to 2 models of mats, at HealthyWaveMat.com we have a very extensive line of different models and sizes, although in this video we're going to be focusing on our newest 5 therapy high intensity series. But if you do want to learn more about the other series, such as the 4 therapy mats, chakra mats, or our most advanced PEMF mats, the multi-wave series, you can check them out at HealthyWaveMat.com after watching this video.
To start off the testing, we are testing the Healthy Wave mat for any EMFs coming off the heating wires. This test needs to be done with the PEMF off, as PEMF is a type of magnetic field. And from the testing, you can see the Healthy Wave mat has little to no EMFs. Next, testing the HigherDose, we are getting similar results with little to no readings on our tri-field meter, indicating HigherDose's heating elements are low EMF as they claim. Finally, when testing the Kala mat, we start to get different results, as even though they claim to have EMF remediation, which harmonizes and shields against harmful electromagnetic radiation, when we do turn on the heating on their mat, we actually end up with quite a miserable EMF all throughout the mat and even above it. Although this EMF is only present when the heating feature is active, as if we turn down the heat to stop the mat from heating, this electromagnetic field disappears, which helps us confirm the EMFs we are reading are coming from the heating wires and not the PEMF.
So the issue with non-EMF free heating in the infrared PEMF mats, such as we tested with the Kala, is you can see on our oscilloscope here, we are measuring the 60 Hertz EMF because the heating elements are on. And the issue is this interferes with the PEMF. As when we turn on the PEMF here, you can see there's no longer a clean PEMF occurring. What we're having is we're having the PEMF overlap with the EMF, and this effectively eliminates the PEMF, as a pulsed electromagnetic field has a magnetic field turning on and off. And when we have the 60 Hertz EMF running in the background, we no longer get this off in the PEMF, and all we get is an increase in intensity on the EMF as we're seeing right now on the oscilloscope as this is running.
For the next test, we are going to test the heating time of all three mats. We are starting with all three mats completely unheated. As you can see, they're all at approximately the same ambient temperature. And then, through the magic of video editing, we're going to let 30 minutes pass and test what temperature all the mats are at then. As you need to heat up the mats before using it, the faster it heats up, the quicker you can enjoy and get the benefits your infrared PEMF mat provides. Now that 30 minutes has passed, we can test the temperature of each mat, starting with the Healthy Wave mat, which has an average temperature of about 100.5 degrees. The Kala is next, and its temperature is pretty close, at an average of around 99 degrees or a bit below. And finally, the HigherDose coming in third at around 94 degrees. On to the PEMF testing, we are starting with the HigherDose, testing their PEMF programs, which they advertise 4 programs between 3 and 23 Hz. The first one we are measuring, which is showing us 15 Hz or 15 pulses per second. Program 2 cuts the amount of pulses in half, leaving us with 7.5 pulses per second. When we switch to program 3, we now end up with 5.45, or about 5.5 pulses per second, which all these readings we are getting appear to differ from their manual, which says the frequencies should be 3, 7.8, 10, and 23 Hz. And finally, the last program which we are measuring at 2.5 Hz. Now we're examining the column-matched PEMF programs, and we're on the first program, which is 3 Hz, and the window we see is 1 second, and we do see 3 pulses per second passing by. We switch to the second program, which is 8 Hz, and you see 8 pulses per second passing by again. You will notice some are a little bit longer than others, which is going to be relevant for later programs. Program 3, we're now at 10 Hz, and again, 10 pulses per second passing by. Program 4 here, it's a lot harder to see, but if you do pause it, this is 25. You can find 25 total pulses at least passing by there, all separated. And it's program 5 where it starts to get a little bit questionable of how they're counting the PMF, but there is a little bit of discretion companies can take how they determine their frequencies. And this is supposed to be 40 Hertz. But if you counted the previous ways, you would only get to 30 Hertz unless you zoom in, and you can see that a pulse like here, this is one pulse, but then you have pulses beside it, which are longer. And if you count these as additional pulses, more than one pulse, that's what you would have to do to get to 40 Hertz. And then when we go to program 6, this is supposed to be 48 Hertz. And now the pulses and the cutoffs are getting really close together. And it would be very hard, in my opinion, to count out to 48 Hertz from this. You're free to pause the video and try to do that if you want. Next program is program 7, and this is supposed to be 56 Hertz, but you'll see the reading down here is reading 60 Hertz, as at this point it is almost a continuous sine wave, although there are some little cutoffs during a few of the mid pulses, and this is how they determine it to be 56 Hertz in their opinion. And then program 8, this is supposed to be 64 Hertz, but at this point here, this is now just a continuous sine wave, and it is only 60 Hertz. And while there is some discretion companies can take on how they calculate their frequencies, I think at this point of the 64 Hertz, and maybe even the previous one before, it really shouldn't be considered PMF at all, since there's no pulsing of the magnetic field, and this is turning it on and off effectively, and this is just running a continuous EMF. And then our final program, program 9, just this cycles through the previous 8 different programs at random. And additionally, in their marketing, they do say they have pulse duration, different pulse durations and 3 drop-off rates, but from all the different programs we've seen here, they all have the exact same pulse duration, and they're just cutting it off for different repetition rates. And I believe they may have gotten this idea of marketing 3 pulse durations from our multi-wave, which is more advanced and actually does have 3 different pulse durations of 0.5 milliseconds, 5 milliseconds, and 16 milliseconds, which the column mat does not, as all their pulses, all the sine waves here, have pulse durations of approximately 16 milliseconds. Now, we're going to look at the different programs and the different frequencies the Healthy Wave Mat has. So in the model we're looking at, there are 32 different frequencies. Along with the 1 to 30 Hertz, there's also 0.5 Hertz and 0.25 Hertz. So 0.5 Hertz is going to be 1 pulse every 2 seconds, and 0.25 Hertz is going to be 1 pulse every 4 seconds. And the 1 to 30 Hertz range is a very good range to use because these do align with your brainwave frequencies. And especially when we do all the individual pulses, they do highly correlate and can have some brain entrainment effects. So right now we're at 1 Hertz, and our capture screen on our oscilloscope is about 1 second. So we are seeing 1 pulse per second passing by. Now we're not going to go through every individual frequency, but we're just going to sample a few. So now we're at 6 Hertz, and we have 6 pulses per second passing by. We'll go to 11 Hertz. And again, we get 11 pulses per second. Go up to 15. And again, 15 pulses per second. Go up to 20 Hertz. And again, there's 20 pulses per second. Next, we'll go to 25. And if you want to pause your screen, you could count them all up, but there is 25 pulses per second passing by. And we'll finally go to 30 Hertz, which is the highest frequency we have, and you get 30 pulses per second. Our next test is measuring the intensity of the PMF, which we measure in Gauss. This lets us determine how strong the PMF field is, which also affects how far the PMF extends beyond the surface of the mat. As magnetic fields weaken the further away you get from their source, so a strong starting magnetic field is important, which means having a high Gauss. First, testing the HigherDose mat, we get a reading of 4.7 Gauss, which is useful information to know as HigherDose does not list the intensity of their PMF mat. Next, we are testing our Healthy Wave mat, which has a reading of just over 30 Gauss. As we do have different models of mats, you can always visit our website, healthywavemat.com, to learn the intensities of all our different models and series. Additionally, to explain what equipment we are using, this is an FW Bell Gauss meter, one of the most advanced Gauss meters for measuring magnetic field intensity, and also has the unique ability to measure the intensity of a single pulse, something regular Gauss meters do not have the ability to do, which is why if you use your own Gauss meter, you will likely get a lot lower readings, as cheaper Gauss meters are not designed to measure the intensity of individual PMF pulses. Finally, we test the Kala mat, which does have a solid Gauss of just over 22, which is pretty good. Although Kala advertises their Gauss as 966, which is nothing close to the intensity we are measuring with our FW Bell Gauss meter, which does have the ability to measure into the tens of thousands of Gauss. Finally, keep in mind, these are peak Gauss measurements at the surface of the mat directly above the coils. If you move away from these spots, the magnetic fields will weaken. This is just the standard way PMF companies typically list the intensity of their products. We do have more information on our website, healthywavemat.com, if you want to learn more about how these magnetic fields distribute above the mats.
So a second way we can confirm the intensity is using our sensor here connected to the oscilloscope. Because let's pause this here to capture one pulse. Because basically each division here is 10 volts, which for this sensor is equal to 10 Gauss. So we can see about 1, 2, maybe a little bit more. This could be up to 25. It's reading a little bit higher than the FW Bell, but that's the reading we're getting from the column mat. Now let's resume. And this isn't the optimal spot here. I'll try to, you can see, move it a little bit here. It's going to lower. That again was the optimal spot. If we move it more over here, it lowers. And in either other direction, it wasn't as optimal. And now we take this over to our Healthy Wave, and we also try to find the optimal spot, which I think we're getting a little bit closer to right here. And you can already visually see that the spike is bigger. Now let's try to pause and capture one and zoom in. And you can see we have 1, 2, 3, actually measuring possibly 3.5 divisions. So this does confirm that the Gauss we're getting is definitely at least 10 Gauss higher on the Healthy Wave, and the Kala is definitely not 966 Gauss.
Our next test is measuring the PMF field distribution. Healthy Wave full-size mats use 6 to 8 coils. 8 coils in this model, which we are currently testing, which provides sufficient PMF coverage all throughout the surface and above the mat. While this is some very basic brief testing, we do provide much more in-depth testing on our website, healthywavemat.com. The column mat uses 6 total coils, but this still works really well, as when we test their mat, we find they have great PMF field distribution. When you use sufficient intensity and enough coils, you're going to end up with pretty good PMF field distribution, as you can see from the testing. The HigherDose mat is a little different as they only use 4 PMF coils, or PMF cores as they like to call them, all of which are positioned near the center of the mat, which you can see leads to the PMF field dropping off quite significantly when we get closer to the edges of the mat. Additionally, these 4 coils are positioned in the middle to the top portion of the mat, which leaves the lower portion of the mat without very much PMF field coverage at all. While no PMF mat creates a perfectly even magnetic field, and you will have strong and weak spots, this does leave a fairly empty spot near the foot of the mat.
Grounding often gets conflated with PEMF technology. As you'll see in many descriptions from sellers of various different PEMF mats, the term grounding often starts getting used to describe their PEMF technology, and some consumers may think there are actual grounding properties. So we're going to test this with the 3 mats, and we can do this through a very simple grounding test where we use a voltmeter with the black lead connected to the ground, and the red lead we're going to hold on to ourselves. And to demonstrate this, we have our Healthy Wave grounding and shielding sheet, which is plugged in with a ground wire, so it will have very strong grounding properties here. So to do this test, we just hold the red lead, and we can look at our meter and see our base reading is about 1.8 to 1.9 volts. I'll actually use my other hand. And then when we do test the Healthy Wave grounding and shielding sheet, we do see a significant drop down to under 50 millivolts. So this is the type of effect we will get if we are getting a grounding effect from any of the PEMF mats. We're going to test the Kala mat now for any grounding or possible anti-grounding effects it has. So we have our lovely assistant laying on the table here, holding our lead from the previous test example. And we can see our baseline is sitting at approximately 3.8 volts. And the Kala mat is currently unplugged. So let's plug it in and turn on the controller here. And we have it on. It's starting to heat up. We haven't even turned on the PEMF yet. And you can see we're actually getting quite a large increase to almost 5.8 volts now. So the Kala mat is not having any grounding effects, and it's actually having a little bit of anti-grounding effects from the increase in voltage we're measuring in our lovely assistant here. Now, we're going to test the Healthy Wave mat for any grounding or possible anti-grounding effects. We have our assistant laying down, holding the end of the lead here, and the mat is currently turned off. And our base reading, again, is around 3.2 volts. So now let's take the mat and let's plug it in. So it's plugged in, and we're going to turn it on and turn the heat on. And now with the heat on, you can see we've actually got a grounding effect now, and it's dropped from over 3.2 volts to less than 400 millivolts. So this is showing there is significant grounding properties when using a Healthy Wave mat. Finally, to test the HigherDose mat for any grounding or anti-grounding effects. And again, we have our lovely assistant lying on the mat holding the lead to our meter. And our base reading, it's sitting a little bit higher at about 4 volts. But let's see how this changes when we plug in the HigherDose mat. So we will plug it in, and let's turn on the heat, which is already on the mats here. And what changes do we get? We can actually see there's an extremely large increase to 94 volts. So the HigherDose is not having a grounding effect and is definitely having more of an anti-grounding effect when lying on it. There are also a few other differences we'll go over now between the HigherDose, Kala, and Healthy Wave mats. One factor is the additional therapies, which the Kala mat does have a TENS therapy applicator you can use, while the Healthy Wave mat, we have red light therapy. Now, I personally do like TENS therapy, but this is a therapy I prefer to use separately, as I don't find it very relaxing having my muscles contracted by electrostimulation. In comparison, the Healthy Wave has passive red light therapy. This isn't meant to replace separate red light therapy devices such as what Kala offers, but it does help deliver some extra ATP energy during your mat session to enhance those synergistic effects. Next, Healthy Wave mat is the only mat where you get free covers. One thin cover to protect the mat from sweat and whatever else, and one thick cover which also helps the mat a bit softer to lay on. Both are very useful, as when using an infrared mat, you're going to sweat and you do want to protect your mat from getting dirty. HigherDose offers covers separately starting at $79, and Kala doesn't currently offer covers for their mat. Finally, there is a return and warranty. Both HigherDose and Kala have a 30-day return period to try out the mat, where in comparison, at Healthy Wave, we give you 90 days. As with 90 days, you're really going to get a chance to try the mat out and see the benefits it can provide. When it comes to warranty, HigherDose has a 1-year warranty and Kala has a 2-year warranty. And at healthywavemat.com, we have a 5-year warranty and a lifetime trade-in policy where you can trade in your mat in any condition and receive 50% of its value towards a new mat. Make sure to learn the full details at healthywavemat.com. So, in conclusion, I believe the tests we have performed have shown that the Healthy Wave mat beats both the HigherDose and Kala in every area we tested, at a similar to lower price with superior return and warranty policies. I know when shopping for infrared PEMF mats, there are more and more options popping up every day. We can't test and compare every single brand out there. The only reason why we chose HigherDose and Kala is these are the mats we get the most questions about. And while all these mats look similar, you can see from the testing there are some very significant differences. So if you are looking for an infrared PEMF mat, Healthy Wave should be your go-to choice, as you can be assured you're not only getting the best infrared PEMF mat, but you also know exactly what you're getting. Plus, you get to deal with our expert support team when deciding on what mat is best for you and any support you may need afterwards. Customer support is something we really focus on at healthywavemat.com, and we would love to hear from you, so feel free to phone us or send us an email with any questions you have.